1899 ending explained, beginning on a steamship called Coronavirus in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean in 1899. We went on to finish 8 episodes later, 200 years in the future, in outer space outside of the original simulation in the year 2099. I went into the show not knowing what to expect, and that was most certainly the best mindset to have with multiple characters, including NPCs, to delve into the very idea and fascination around the brain, the limits of what we know about it, and the focus on what the ending meant. I'm going to recap, break down, and explain all that there was to take away from this series, so let's get into it. This is where Chapter 99 concludes. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. This show was certainly a mind-bender. And as each episode progressed, you were constantly left guessing about what was real, what was reality, and if what we were watching even existed. The trip to New York for a group of people fleeing a torturous past was the only thing that each of the passengers on board Coronavirus had in common. However, the similarities between Cobras and Prometheus, the ship that we were first introduced to and which had gone missing for months, was uncanny. And you could see the same fate being made, which we did eventually see. Maura was the main person that we were following throughout the show, and her connection to the young boy who didn't speak and the mystery passenger who bought the ship called Daniel. This young boy earlier turned out to be his son, and Daniel turned out to be her husband. As the episodes went on, we saw the focus shift to making us question what reality was and if we could believe that things were as they appeared in front of us, if the life that we were living was the true and only reality. This was something that was at the core of the show and tied directly into the ending, which was left open with a question. The Copper ship, the Prometheus ship, and many others were all parts of a simulation. And what we were watching unfold was not the real world. We were led to believe that Henry Moore, his father, had created this simulation and trapped her in it, when in reality, Maura and Elliot created the simulation so that they'd be able to be with their child Elliot, who had died. This simulation was the only way that they were able to see him, hence why we always saw him in the grave. However, there had been another in there. Her brother, Karen, whose character we heard of throughout the season, was the main villain behind the reason why she was stuck in there. He took over the whole code of the simulation and kept her trapped there, leading her to forget all of her memories. The journey to New York was something that was never going to arrive because it didn't go that far. It was just an endless loop. Elliot had been trying his best to wake her up inside the simulation, which he did manage to do. Elliot sends a virus to the main program, which is what we see unfold in the climax of the finale, and he changed the wake-up trigger. Instead of it being the key and the black pyramid, Elliot changed it to his wedding ring and a pyramid design similar to one of Elliot's toys. We saw more characters reuse it and wake up, but she awoke in the year 2099 in space with all of the other show characters plugged into the simulation. We saw a piece of paper that read, "Read me your coffee kickin' before reality does," which was a line written on all of the books on board the Coronavirus. The final thing that we saw was a display screen where it stated Project Prometheus, with the coordinates of the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean and all of the relevant numbers of the passengers and crew, meaning that the ship was always destined to sink. It was a never-ending cycle of sinking and forgetting memories until more people figured out how to wake up. Alongside this was a message saying, "Hello, sister, welcome to reality," meaning that she was now stuck in a reality of floating around in the middle of space on her inside of a ship called Project Prometheus, as another simulation of the project was about to begin for those that were plugged in and hooked up. Unless this is also just another simulation that she's in, who can question if she's now in reality? And she didn't question that she was in a simulation back in 1899. That's what I believe the ending intended for us to believe. Karen could be playing God, especially since it finished zooming into her right and her pupil was in the shape of a pyramid, which we saw throughout the show when they woke up inside the simulation. As Henry mentioned when speaking with Elliot, we know no bounds to what is real and what is not. And if the mind has limitless amounts of knowledge to obtain, one of the first lines in the show is that our brain is wider than the sky and deeper than the ocean. So it's rather fitting that the final shot was of more space, where it's forever expanding, just like we like to think knowledge is. There was an empty pod next to Jerome, and in the final scene, Maura was looking around. So it does make me wonder who that belongs to. And, even if it was originally Karen's, as Maura wasn't in that part, escaping a traumatic past was something that was also at the heart of this series, but I feel it tied it together on the face. The fact that there's no escaping something that you're trying to forget, even when plugged into a simulation where the characters were programmed to not remember anything, that traumatic past was still coming back, and it was haunting them like a ghost. And in some cases, it was the guilt from the betrayal, as well as the grief, that stayed with you for a long time. And even in Moore's case, when you try to undo the past, it can often cause more trouble than letting go. I enjoyed this show. It was a dark, mysterious sci-fi thriller, and we've not had something like this in a long while. The subtlety of the details in the show, such as the pyramids and triangles being everywhere, such as on earrings, clothing, and decorations, was plastered throughout the show. And it was very clever. The connection between tapping into the people's core memories even though they couldn't remember anything and being able to access them by going underneath their bed was well thought out and showed the different parts of the brain as well as the different memories that individuals stored, again tying into the idea that they can't just be forgotten. The twist at the end with Henry being written into the narrative like many of the other characters was something that I thought was clever. I genuinely believe he was the bad guy in everything, but all he wanted was to get away. He was just as trapped as everyone else by the coronavirus. All of the character arcs brought something unique to the show and showed that despite the different classes, types of people, and geographical locations from where they came, it painted them all in a similar light and showed just how connected everybody was. I would say my favorite episodes were the first few and the final two. The first 3 episodes were just perfect. They set up the world and showed us that quite literally anything was possible within it, alongside getting to know these characters and all that they'd been through, plus the mystery around Elliot, the fog, and the supernatural element to it. And in a final couple of episodes, it felt like we quite literally went on a roller coaster ride where, even though characters were dying, it didn't feel like there were any consequences. So the emotional attachment to losing so many didn't weigh on you as a viewer. Plus, all of the revelations were satisfying, and the ending did feel like something you could have certainly seen from the Twilight Zone. And I think that's something that felt quite fresh about it because there was twist after twist, but it managed to top it every time with a rewarding payoff at the end. This show appears to be one of a kind on the platform. With it being set at 99, you feel like you were immersed in that time period. And the contrast of technology that we see being used, along with the destination of the final scene, does make it feel like you've gone on a real journey as a viewer, so I commend it for that, and I'd recommend giving the show a watch because I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, type the name in comments and don't forget to subscribe.